This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
Well, it is a great pleasure of mine to introduce colleagues who are far away from New York City. Thomas.faucher has just recently relocated to Egypt, where he is at the Centre d'études Alexandrines in Egypt, having recently left the CNRS in Bordeaux to undertake a position in Egypt for the next while. Thomas is, of course, a well-published scholar on Egyptian coinage, and has also published quite a bit on various topics related to the production of coinage. Jérémy Artru is joining us from Orléans University in France, and Dr. Caroline Collier is joining us from the École normale supérieure de Lyon. Both of them are in France, and both of them have worked to some degree as well on Egyptian and other coinages of these coinages. So it is really a pleasure of mine, particularly, to welcome the three of them, and once again have to really just be amazed at the technology today that allows us to come together from all sorts of different parts of the world for this presentation. So with that, I'm happy now to turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you. First, we would like to thank Lucia Carbone for inviting us to present our work, and all those who sent us pictures of very informative coins. If any of you know any specific coins that could be included in our study, please free to contact us. We would be pleased to add them in our corpus. Our email addresses are written on the conference announcement. The study that we will present is an ongoing project. It's focused on coin production traces in the Greek world from the 8th century BC to the Roman conquest. We include all the traces made until the moment the coins leave the workshop. Next slide, please. Jérémy. Merci. To date, we have gathered around 50 different traces and have assembled a corpus of 150 interesting coins. We classified them according to their position in the production process: flan making or adjusting, die making, wear and maintenance, and striking process. There is a last category for traces that we don't fully understand. And today, we will only present a few of these traces due to the limited time. Some traces, such as those produced by overstrikes and brockages, are very well known and have been studied, while others remain undocumented. For the latter, we must create a specific name, a clear description, and write the study. Our aim is to gather and organize the knowledge about these traces in order to create an efficient tool for researchers and collectors willing to study production traces on Greek coins. This data will be published as an article, and the definitions will be added to Nomisma's ontology. Next slide, please. We are lucky in the field of numismatics to have a collaborative website such as Nomisma, because it allows for a lot of common projects. In a few words, the principle of this kind of ontology is to organize existing knowledge on a specific topic while presenting its key notions. All the websites presenting ancient coins can make use of the vocabulary standards established by Nomisma, as this will allow them to clarify the exact meaning of the terms they use. There is a section Peculiarity of Production on Nomisma, in which we will add the traces of coin making to complete the existing words. Once this is done, it will become possible for museums using online catalogs, to include information on their coins' observable production traces, and to gather the examples in Nomisma or on an online catalog. It will allow for specific studies on each traces. This will bring us new sources about coinages and about work at the mints, about which we only have very little information. Some traces are useful for dating the coins. When we study a series, it's often easy to distinguish the coins made in archaic, classical, or Hellenistic times based on their different shapes, thicknesses, weights. And some traces are reliable post-quem termini. For example, the central cavities, very common on the Ptolemaic coins after 2060. The questions of local characteristics and of the transmission of knowledge, both on a regional scale and from one side to the Mediterranean to the other, are very broad. Answer can only be found by carrying out a workshop-by-workshop study, by first questioning the limits and observable differences within the same mint. Certain traces also testify to the mint organization and to the conditions of manufacture of the coinage. Certain series betray many traces of clumsiness, probably because they were struck in urgency. Others were made over a very long time with extremely used dies. There are also traces of techniques which are obviously used to allow for good productivity. All these traces open questions about the limits of the specifications that the craftsmen have to respect for the calibration of the flans, the quality of the engraving, or the productivity. In an attempt to answer this question, we are first gathering particularly informative coins into a corpus. However, this is not so simple because only specific coins are production traces, and some of these probably should not have entered circulation. They are quite rare in museum collections, the latter being often made up of fine specimens. It's rather in certain hoards and excavated coins that we see a certain diversity in the quality of production. In addition, to study the manufacture marks, it's necessary to have good photos of the faces, but also of the age, which is often all that remains of the blank. But as the age is never photographed in catalogs, it's necessary to study coins in public collections. Unfortunately, production traces are rarely mentioned in sales catalog, on museum websites, and in series studies, probably because these traces remain poorly known and poorly referenced.
We just know this, like numismatists were really interested in coin production since a very long time. Next slide, please. Question about alloy, about die making were put into perspective from that what people knew at that time. In each numismatic handbook, like the one, Jérémy, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just showing, no, this one before.
This one?
No, the one with the book. Yeah,
okay, there's a bit delay between. Okay.
Okay, what I see and what you are doing. Sorry. Yeah, just to mention that in the numismatic handbooks in the 19th century, like, people presented a chapter on the coin production. Of course, what they knew about at that time were not very accurate. Sometimes they were good, like coin analysis were really accurate at point at that moment, but for example, there was this idea that a die was only striking only few coins, and they had to remove it. So it's interesting to see how it changed. The only examples that you see here are in French, but I'm sure that it's the same in other languages. The thing is, like, the numismatists usually know very well their coins and scrutinize them, so they have an interest in these questions. But as I said, literature is mixing very good and very wrong ideas about ancient coin minting. There was a real shift in the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th, beginning of 20th, with Ernest Babelot and George Francis Hill. And you have the article of George Francis Hill called Ancient Methods of Coining, that is really, really nice in a lot of a way. For some reasons, and with the hyper-specialization that characterize modern scholarship, this question almost disappeared from literature during the 20th century. In a way that some numismatic handbooks written at the end of the 20th century did not propose a very much improved version of what was written a century before. The fact is that what we know from excavation, the evidence is very small. Less than a dozen of Greek mint workshops were actually excavated, the official ones. And that obliged us to look at the coins themselves to understand the way they were produced. Next slide, please. So I'm showing again this slide that shows how we present the work from the blank making to the traces of the die and the striking process. As Caroline said, we won't present everything because it will be a long list and a long catalog of errors, and some are very common and less interesting than other. We just want to put some highlights on some type. Next slide, please. On the coin making, we actually do not know much how the gold and silver coins were produced, and we don't know a lot about coin making in the very beginning, I must say. It's a lot better for bronze because we have more evidence from excavations, and this is the example that the rose and the flans that were found in Tazos. That was one technique that were used. The other technique is the technique of the molds in limestone or in clay that you can find in Paphos, for example, or in the Levantine that were very well studied by Donald Larrière, for example. And you have some other example like this coin mold from Carthage that was presented by Suzanne Frey Cooper. You also have other techniques like the molded coins, but this technique is sometimes debatable if it was used in official workshops. Next slide, please. Sorry, we have a bit of delay between our connections. It's not really easy to present. Jérémy, tu vois l'autre ou c'est juste la connexion qui est faible?
Parce que c'est assez lent, mais j'ai changé.
Ouais. Ok. What we want to present, sorry, I just can't have to, okay.
You still see the molds?
Yeah, I still see. Caroline, do you see the next slide, or it's me?
It's the first one with flan making and adjusting.
Yeah,
with
but
the casting screws.
With the mold.
With the casting spruce.
With the casting spruce? I don't see it. Okay, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it now. Sorry. Sorry about that. So one of the evidence we see the most in coins are these sprues, these casting sprues. We can show like, I don't know, dozens of thousands of this example. I show only a few of them. You have some that are round, that's square, triangle, small, big, thin. So it's not of very big interest, but to show that each coin is really interesting and can help to give more information on this. We can also see, if you see the picture on the bottom of the slide, how the coins were cut actually with a chisel, and the first part is cut by the chisel and it was removed by the force and by when it attached. So there is also a very interest for us in seeing the edges of the coins, and unfortunately most of the coins, if not all the coins, are two-dimensional, one for the obverse and the other one for the reverse, and a lot of information are missing if we don't see the edge. So we have sometimes it's a bit more difficult to work on this side if we don't see the coins directly. These casting sprues are of course very interesting. Some look like casting sprues, but they are way different. And Jérémy, that's the example you see on the bottom right, and Jérémy will speak more about this now.
Thank you. The point I would like to develop is somewhat similar to the one just mentioned by Thomas. And on the edge of some Greek coins, we often find two protrusions, two projections at two diametrically opposed points of the edge. I will not go into detail, but this is a very good example of the way in which we can try to have a better understanding of the manufacturing techniques by taking a close look at the coins. These traces may recall the casting sprues just mentioned by Thomas, but are actually quite different. The main characteristics of these traces are the following. First of all, they can have various shapes, but are quite thin and generally much thinner than the casting sprue. As you can see here, it's just an example from the Carthaginian series. These projections also have various orientation, various angles. On this example of the two coins from Akragas in Sicily, struck with the same pair of dies, we can see a protrusion with very different angles. On the first one, a wide angled one, and on the second, a more inclined one. Here are other examples directly seen from the edges. This is a very interesting and very important point for the understanding of this making process. And another important element we can find is that sometimes there is some traces of metal compression on the faces, not only on the edge, on the faces, in connection with these protrusions. There is an old hypothesis to explain this phenomenon. These coins would have been produced from blanks cast in spherical molds made of two hemispherical halves, a bit like this kind of bullet mold. During the casting process, the molten metal flows between the two halves, making a sort of ridge all around the sphere. This ridge would then disappear on the faces when the sphere is being flattened, but would remain on the edges precisely because they are not flattened. Metallurgical experimentation have recently been carried out on this subject in order precisely to challenge this hypothesis. It's not the place here to go into the details, and they should normally be published next year, but they nevertheless provide two essential pieces of information. First of all, the hypothesis of the spherical mode look to be confirmed, and it is possible to cast and transform silver spheres into coins. However, it is also possible to provide details on the intermediate metallurgical stage between the casting of the sphere and the striking, especially hammering and annealing. And from an historical point of view, and I will end with this, it is particularly interesting to study the diffusion of this technique from Sicily to some other mint in South Italy, but in all around the Mediterranean. And I let Thomas continue.
Okay, can you, next slide, please? Okay, so coins, as we saw, the sprues of coins, casting sprues, are usually removed before the coin is struck, and they also are usually deburred before striking. But sometimes it's not, like the example you see on the left, which is very interesting to see what type of mold was used, and the care taken by monnayers also. You can see the examples on the right where people try to cut the sprues, but just you see only the print of the chisel when they try to remove the spruce. So it's also good information on what type of object and what type of tool was used during that time. Next slide, please. On the bronze coins, and for some periods only, edges were carefully filled, sometimes 3 or 4 times, in order to make an almost perfect round shape that, in my opinion, was to look like, I mean, at least for bronze coin, to look like silver and gold coins. You see example on the left, how detailed and how much work was for the monnayers to take care of these coins, and how long the work must have been. Also on bronze coins, we also find traces of surface polishing. This appears mainly on large bronze coins. It was a way for the monnayers to facilitate the striking. Indeed, if you do not have a perfectly flat surface or flan, there is a large risk to see your coin not completely neat with some unpricked zones. We'll see that later. Now, it comes from the fact that the bronze is a lot harder to strike than silver or gold, and that the force needed for striking was way bigger. So it means that the dies were engraved not as deep as the dies for bronze, and it means that the force was a lot bigger to put into it. So the most famous trace of this technique is the central cavity that appears on Ptolemaic coins, but also on some Seleucid coins, and later on some Provençal coins as well. The central cavity sometimes appear alongside concentric grooves that shows how the tool were used. So you can see that on this example. Next slide, please. Other surfacing existed. and it is likely that a lot of ancient bronze flans were polished before striking. For example, the workshop of the Mint of Marseille in south of France, which was excavated 20 years ago, but unfortunately not published yet, was equipped with large polishing stones for that purpose. I think Peter Hogg that sent us some examples of these coins coming from Amisos and Sinop that also show signs of this polishing. In this case, it's another technique. It's just not concentric, but it's lateral polishing, and that shows that this was used before striking. As you can see, these grooves were very deep, and it's possible that this was to strike coins. To polish already coins to overstrike them, but we still don't have more clues to go deeper on that subject. But I will need to look more carefully on this thing. Jérémy?
Yes. The serrated edges are another characteristic of the manufacture of blanks. They are well known on Republican coins and in the Greek world on the Seleucid coins from the mid-2nd century BC. This phenomenon can be seen on other coin edges like in Macedonia and in Carthage. And this is in Carthage, in my opinion, the oldest attestation of this practice for the precious metals, and not only silver, but a little bit of gold too. From a technical point of view, it is clear that several processes could have been used. For the bronze, it seems that the serration was produced directly during the casting process by using molds with specific shapes, even if the blanks had to be later retouched, as attested by the presence of central cavities, as mentioned by Thomas. In this picture, it is interesting to note the presence of the casting, the remains of the casting screws, which have not been properly erased and are clearly visible. The difference between the techniques employed are very clear, even clearer, sorry, if we compare the Seleucid coins with the Roman one. And on the Roman coins, it seems quite clear that a sharp tool was used to make cuts, to make notches in the blank after the casting process. I will not go into detail here on the question of the why such serrated coins were produced, and I let Caroline talk about the last point concerning the traces of the blank making process.
Okay, so next slide, please. No, it's for Thomas, I think.
Sorry, there's a delay in the slide. I can't say. Jérémy, peut-être que tu peux prendre ta caméra pour voir.
Ouais, je suis.
It's a folded flan.
Est-ce que tu veux que je passe direct? Je vais passer Caroline à la suivante.
Ok.
Est-ce que Caroline, do you see the right?
No. Yes, now yes. On some silver coins, as these coins of Velia and Millet, a small cut is made, probably to adjust their weight. This phenomenon is very uncommon in the Greek world and never concerns entire series. This implies that the coins concerned were weighed individually after striking in the workshop, where their weights were adjusted. The weight adjustment in Greece seems more common before striking, when coins are used as flans. It's obvious that when a mint overstrikes coins, it could be necessary to adjust the weight. It can be difficult to distinguish gouge marks from other flan flows. For example, some coins of Odessos in the name of Mithridates bear a cut, always in the same place, near the cheek of Alexander on the obverse. And these marks were made before striking. We have to gather and study more of these coins to know if the theory of the weight adjustment is valid. It perhaps the trace of an overstrike, because if the metal was removed in the middle of the type, it perhaps because it's where the relief is the highest. But for now, it's only an hypothesis. The trace of a previous type on a coin is a particular category because, strictly speaking, any flan is made. A coin is used as a flan to make another one. It happens that the previous type remains partially visible, which blurs the last type printed. Sorry. This can be perfectly identifiable parts of the type, like on the Hellenistic coin of Knossos on the screen, struck on a coin of Alexander Zebina, with the hair of the king clearly visible on the obverse, and those seated on the reverse. On other coins, like the didrachma on the screen, there are only a few lines on the cheek and the mouth. Non-coins showing overstrike traces are estimated to form only 1 or 2% of the ancient coin preserved, so a few thousand coins. When it's possible to identify them, overstrikes are a very precious source. They inform us about the dating of the series, because the earlier type provides a postquem terminus, the movement of coins, and the cash holdings of the cities. Next slide, please. An overstrike database will be put online next year on the website of the European Silver Project, based at the École normale supérieure de Lyon. It's dedicated to the movement of silver in Greek antiquity. I mention it because I've been working on this project for 2 years under the supervision of François de Calataille and Francis Albaret. Next slide, please. And as on the David MacDonald book that you perhaps know, for each coin, we will give data about the overstriking coin and about the overstruck type. Next slide, please. Jérémy, merci. Now we will show you traces from the second category, the making, wear, and maintenance of the die. And we begin with the multiple dice traces. On a few coins, and always on the obverses, there are traces of a second type engraved next to the first one. It can be the same type as the one on the coin, reverted or not, like the coin of Lisha with the forepart of a boar, it's the first one on the screen, or on the Ephesian coin that Rudolf Hilbert sent to us, with 2 boars face to face. For other coins, the traces of the second type are of another series, possibly from another denomination, like the border of dots of the coin of Velia in front of the head, and on the stater of Philip, just behind the neck of Apollo. This means that at least 2 types were engraved in the same die, or that they were assembled into the same anvil. Such traces are very rare, but for some series, like the Persian sigloi, we know different coins with the same traces of the second type exactly in the same position as each other. It's not obvious on all the coins, but there is a coin under the king on all the pictures. We can also wonder if the curved line cutting a lot of the linear borders on Carthaginian coins are from other types. They appear are gold, silver, and bronze coins, and they remain very mysterious. Using different obverse dies at the same time allows for faster work and changes the usual proportion of obverse and reverse dies. Indeed, for most of the series, we know more reverse dies than obverse dies because the reverse struck by the hammer break faster. But if one reverse is used with different obverses, the proportion is inverted. So even if we know of only a few coins with a trace of a multiple die, this technique can be identified with die studies. And the next category is about the die wear. And a previous slide, please, Jérémy. Merci. A lot of dies are used even when they are worn. And with time, the relief can become smoother, like on the obverse of the stater of Corinth on the screen. The relief is very low. On the reverse, under the type, there are traces of the break of the die. The same is noticeable for the coin from Chios. On the upper part of the reverse, the die was broken and the missing part was filled with metal. We also often see cracked die traces, like on the reverse of this coin from Knossos on the screen. It's a kind of line that grows with the striking process. Some coins have a granular surface, and this is clearly due to the die, not to the flans. These traces are often in the reliefs of the types and as a transposition in relief of little holes in the die. They are probably made by a corroded die. It's an hypothesis. Arguments for this are that these traces are always on the obverse, which is the longest used die, and that the same kind of traces, interpreted as rusted dies, are known on modern coins, like American coins from the 19th century, as you can see on the screen. It seems to be the same corrosion traces on the two coins on the screen. But we don't have any information about the composition of the Greek dies, so this is only a possibility. It could also be small parts of the destroyed dies. We don't know why mints use worn and corroded dies. It perhaps depends on the context, a lack of time, or of engraver to fix them or cut another. We have to gather more coins with those traces to know if they are a specific series. And I will let Jérémy continue.
Yes. Caroline showed us how the engraving of the die could be damaged, and it seems that in some cases, the mints decide to preserve the die by re-engraving some parts of it. Some numismatists identify without difficulty what they interpret as cases of re-engraving. Here, for example, with this secular Punic coin, coins issued and struck from the same obverse die that Jenkins saw as a re-engraved one, notably here on the horse harness and bridle, with some part of the Nike and the letters too. Some other cases, some other cases are more difficult, as this Carthaginian gold coin. Some elements, such as those circled in green, clearly suggest that these are from the same obverse die. This is especially true for those small flowers at the bottom here and here. However, it is also clear that there has been some reengraving, especially in that part of the hair and the crown. In any case, even if the dye had to be regularly, maybe lightly maintained, it seems that the deep reengraving of the types was rare, and that is, it did not extend the lifetime of the dye for a long time. And I give back the floor to Thomas, who will now tell us about the striking process itself.
So the striking was actually an easy process. I mean, you just have to hammer a flan placed between two dies. But if this does not look so problematic, Moneiros through antiquity has some hard times doing it sometimes. Results are not visible most of the time because the flan was put in the same exact position within both die when it was struck a second time. There is an example of an owl on the left that shows that the coin received two blows, at least two, maybe three blows of hammer, but it doesn't make a double strike because the coin were actually replaced in the same position in the die, which is, from the experiments we led, quite easy to do. It happens more often on bronze coins because bronze coins are more difficult to strike because the metal is harder than the silver or gold, and that the die have a tendency to have a rebound. Most of the time, this double stroke appear on the reverse because we see from that it's quite easy to put it back in the obverse die, but sometimes it slips on the reverse die, as we saw as well during experiment. So it's clearly visible on Ptolemaic coins very, very often, and you see on this actual coin on the top right that the eagle is completely, I mean, in two different ways, and the legend, you have Pto from one side and Lemaio from the other side. Sometimes coins look like double stroke, like this Bactrian coin you can see on the right side. But for me, this peculiar thing is just a weak striking, and shows how the die slipped during striking. That shows like it was a double stroke, but apparently not exactly a double stroke. Next slide, please. So the result of bad striking can also be seen in two phenomena: the off-center stroke and poorly struck coins. I'm just waiting to see the slide. Sorry, there is always a delay. So sorry for this. It looks like France is completely undeveloped in this ability of maintaining a good quality internet. Usually it's working well. I don't know what we have problems tonight. Sorry about that. Jérémy,
Caroline, do you see the?
Yes, no, it's a good one.
Okay, sorry.
With the off-centered coins and polystruck.
Yeah, okay, very good. Now there is even a delay between Paris, Orléans, and Orléans and Bordeaux, sorry. So we see two, I mean, some examples here of off-centered coin. Actually, the one on the top left is maybe one of our champion. It's off center, it's double stroke, and it's a brockage at the very same time, which makes this coin very, very interesting. On the bottom, you see a coin where it's actually off center on the overs, also off center on the reverse, which shows for Greek coin that something we know, and François Calatai was working on that, that there is a difference between overs dive and reverse dives, and we usually see the limit of the reverse dives, but almost never, if never, on the overs dives, which is really a characteristic of Greek coins and disappears during the Roman period, which makes it very interesting. And it's also, of course, give us information on how the dies were cut, what kind of dies and we were using, and the difference between overs and reverse. As I said, you can also see poorly struck coins, which happen quite often, and usually it's not that well described in catalogs, and it could look like wear, but it's not wear. It's just how because a coin is not well struck. You can see that on these silver coins. You can see that also on the reverse of this coin, which is a really, really fresh coin, but the side back to on the reverse, you can see that it's poorly struck, and it's happened really often on bronze coin. It's less often on the thing. So I'm laughing because about this very nice joke about back to militaire, which was for people don't know, the French invention that didn't last, but was the former internet, but only worked in France for a while. Now it completely disappeared. Sorry about that. Next, please. Caroline?
Yes. Okay. The last kind of trace that we will show is a negative impression of a type. These two kinds of tarentum are struck with the same dies, and on the lower part of the obverse, there is a border of waves, like on the reverse, and a negative curved line to the left. It results from the impression of the reverse die on the obverse die. A clash die happens when the dies were hammered without a blank between them by accident. The obverse die received a partial relief impression of the reverse. So when this damaged die is used, the relief impression makes a negative and reverted impression on the coin. That's why the waves are to the right, and the dolphin body is transposed in a curved line. Next slide, please, Jen. Yeah. Later, the die was recut. The horse's back legs and the delta were added after the accident. Most of the time, when we have clash dies, traces, it's only on one of the dies, not on both of them. It's perhaps because the dies were not made with the same metal, or because the reverse die, which is the one that absorbs the shock, is stronger. We really don't know. It's only a hypothesis. Next slide, please. On the left, this tatter of Lecas is another example with a negative type on the obverse. Under Pegasus, there is an impression of the head of Athena because the obverse die received a partial relief impression of the reverse. The die was recut like the tarentum ones. We can wonder here if it's a trace of a clash die or a restruck brockage, because brockages produce also a negative type on a coin. It results from the impression of a coin from the same series into the flan when a coin is struck on the die during the striking process. It makes a negative impression of the type. And you have two examples on the screen to the right. For Le Cas, I don't know of another example which would help me verify whether the negative impression is on the die or only on the coin. I think that there are no definitive arguments to determine if it's a brockage or a clash die. We can argue that if it was a restruck brockage, the reverse would have been struck a second time with the same die and would probably present the trace of a double stroke. But it's not a solid argument because some Athenian coins were struck several times without leaving any trace. Another argument for the clash dies would be that we have the impression of a reverse, while the traces of brockages are often the double impression of an obverse. But again, even if it's rare, there are reverse brockages like this coin of Amizos on the screen, sent by Katarina Martin. So in my opinion, we can't know here if it's a brockage or a clash die. And it's a very, very interesting case.
So just a few words to conclude this quick study. Studying traces on coin production on the coins are of special interest and badly need a frame. What we would like to provide is a set of definitions for collectors, scholars, anyone interested in coins, to be able to describe as precisely as possible those traces. It is very common for modern coins, but never have been tackled so directly for ancient coinage. Our aim, of course, is limited to Greek coins, but of course, Roman and Celtic coins could follow for antiquity. In our opinion, describing these traces have two interests. First, it will provide those who are interested in coin production tools for a better understanding of the different steps of flan making, die engraving, and coin striking. But it also offers tools for archaeologists and numismatists to date the series, as we saw that some of the phenomenon are limited in time and space. Furthermore, it will provide, in a larger frame, the possibility to study the movement of monnayers, or techniques, or ideas. Those men face challenges when authorities asking them to produce new coins, new types, larger sizes, new metal. They adapted techniques known for other crafts, and this technique can be followed around the Mediterranean Sea, but as far as borders of India. The second thing is that description offers for collectors and scholars to describe their coin in their most intimate way. This is what makes a coin so special. If even some series were really seen as mass production, each coin was made by hand, one by one, with dedicated, more or less, workers. It is the uniqueness that you can reach in studying and describing those traces of production. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I would like to congratulate our speakers, Caroline, Jérémy, and Thomas, on a absolutely wonderful presentation. That you've covered a great deal of production techniques and problems in a very short period of time. I'd like to open up the floor to some questions if you're willing to take some. And to start, actually, I do have a question about studying coin production techniques, methodologies, basically. I know that, Thomas, you particularly have been involved in what we can call experimental archaeology. You know, roughly a dozen years ago, you and several colleagues set up a mint in France for a summer to strike a number of replicas of Greek coins, essentially. I know that you know, the publication that you produced from that, as well as the short video, is very informative. You learned a lot from that, but do you see that technique of experimental archaeology as something that is worth continuing, and what sort of questions would you use that to answer going forward with this project?
Thank you. It's just, I mean, these experiments have been incredible. I mean, we struck at first something about 20,000 coins, which is both very interesting in the way to producing and making it. And actually, the work we did more than 10 years ago now just continue the past few years. Jérémy, for example, struck these coins and is about to publish this article on these Sicilian coins that he struck himself. We actually did another session of experiments last June, and we are actually making a documentary about it. So it will be soon out at the end of the year, I hope. I think we deal a little bit in a different way right now. We're trying to answer specific questions. We tried like 10 years ago, like there was only this experiment made by Selwood in the 50s, and we really would like to push the question further. I think we did that, but there is limitation. I mean, you can't strike millions of coins, and you can't reach the idea, I mean, to be so close from what was the mean workshop before. But I think if you're looking at a specific question, try to answer them. I think it's really a key thing. And we, of course, it's on the other side of the Atlantic, but we also always do these experiments in June every year. So if people want to meet there, they are most welcome to come and strike coins with us.
Yeah, I seem to recall that you told me at one point that after a summer of striking coins, you were in very, very good shape. So
I was in good shape. Yeah, I think I struck myself. I mean, of course, I was working with a team, and I really thank them for their dedication. But I think I struck myself about 10,000 coins, and it's quite a deal. I would say that I wouldn't have liked to be a monnayeur in the ancient period.
thank you. Do we have any questions from our audience?
Yes, Peter, may I ask?
Oh yeah, Daniel, go ahead.
Specifically, because of the results of the experiments that they did, actually making some sort of Ptolemaic-like bronze coins, is there any evidence from any experiments that coins larger than about 30 millimeters can actually be struck by a single person with a hammer? Is there enough force that one person can generate that the large Ptolemaic coins could actually be produced by one person with a hammer?
That's a very good question. I must say, of course, it depends on the experience. When we started the experiments was 2007. We started with silver coins, and silver coins were quite difficult to strike, but it was okay. We made about 10,000 of them. It was quite easy to strike. And after that, we struck bronze coins. It was a way harder to strike, and we only strike 20 millimeter coins. But that was still okay. That was still possible to strike them. What I mean is that we will be impossible to reach the quality of the guys in the time. Like, for example, a guy came, a forger, not a forger, iron craftsman came at the Min one day, and we were discussing, and the guy said, like, okay, I mean, is it possible to strike a coin? And it was, I mean, quite dangerous. You had to hold the die and everything, and he just took the hammer, just struck, blow the hammer, and he made a perfect coin. And it was his first time. So it's really hard to reach the idea of how force it means. I mean, you can make calculation, of course, but it would be difficult to know if we could do it. And it doesn't mean that if we couldn't do it, it doesn't mean that it was not possible to do. What I see on Ptolemaic coins, especially the large ones, you have so many mistakes and so many double strokes that it was hard to strike. And I'm really not convinced by the idea that Bernard Bouillon and De Perrault proposed sometime that they invent some kind of machine to strike these coins. I think there are enough default on this coin to show that they were really, really difficult to strike. And if they were difficult to strike, it means that they were still striking them by hand. You need a lot of force. You need to put back the coin certainly in the dies again and again, like it was done for the large modern coins, for example, large gold coins that you need to strike them 10, 15, 20 times. Maybe it was the case, but I still think that they were struck by hand.
Thank you. I was just curious because when you double the diameter, you quadruple the amount of force required to strike the coin. And if one person can do a 20-millimeter coin, it raises pretty serious question whether one could ever demonstrate that a single person could strike Ptolemaic coins up to 45 millimeters, which require perhaps 6 times the force.
Yeah, we actually never tried because we would need the die for it, but no, I still think they were hammering it by hammer by one man with a single hammer. But yeah, still opens to question, of course.
Thank you.
A related question in the chat. Susan Sim is asking whether these coins would be struck cold or hot, and of course, by heating the coin, you might require a little less pressure.
That's a good question. I mean, that's one of the question I tackle in my PhD, and there is no consensus in this on this question. What I know for sure is that you can strike easily a very large silver coin. That's not a problem. The question now, is it possible? Of course, you could. I mean, the metal is softer when it's hot. You're facing problems. If you strike a hot flan, it means that you are going to deform a lot more the dies, because they are hot and they will take the temperature, and when the temperature, they will deform easily. That's one problem. The other problem, if you want to keep this coin hot, you need to put that in the fireplace. Put this about 600 or 700 degrees, take it back from the furnace and strike it. That's a complicated process first. And the second is that when you're doing that, you are making corrosion on your coin. It means that you're going to face some kind of a black surface, and you can't strike this. You have to clean them. It means that each time you strike a coin, you need to clean the coin afterwards. Which is a long process, which is a dedicated process. And I'm not sure that, I don't see any good reason for hot striking. There is, of course, a debate, but we try to do it, and it's a lot more complicated to do when you are able to strike. Most of the coins that were produced were quite easy to strike. So I don't see any very good reason for hot striking.
Actually, one related question to that as well, too, just has to do with the metallurgy itself. I wonder if you are involved in looking at the metallurgical composition of the coins as well. I know, Caroline, that you're involved to some degree with those sort of questions with the silver project, and Jérémy, I would imagine that at Orléans, at the center there, metallurgy, of course, has been a huge, important concentration of studies. But is metallurgy a component of this project as well, or in terms of the way that the alloys were created and differences in the alloy and how that might affect the striking of the coins and so forth?
Not so much. We work on traces observable on the coins, and we have many traces to study. So we have to choose. And for now, we don't work on the metallurgy.
Yes, just a complement, there's some interesting points. However, for instance, I just talk about the protrusions on the silver coins, but we can see them also on the bronze coin. And a very important, very interesting question that I don't study for the moment is precisely the composition of this bronze, and it's much more difficult to flatten a bronze with a lot of tin. And this is, for instance, an interesting question. And yes, the composition is a key information in that process.
Yeah, if I can add something there, I'm working on this project now with where we actually cut ancient coins, really worn ones and really not valuable ones, to study their metallic composition. We also do measurements of hardness to see the differences of hardness between because you can have the same composition of coins, but the metallurgical treatment will be different. So we're studying all this process, and actually, if it's not directly in this project that we're working on with Caroline and Jérémy, it helps understand how the coins were made. Of course, it helps to tackle the questions of the signs we saw on the coin. What we have to remind that there are a lot of signs that we still don't know, and we still don't know what they represent and why they are here. And that's also why we need some more information, that it would be of great help if people can send us coins that they found interesting, and that it would be to have an idea of what is it, because sometimes we just don't know what the sign means.
Mark Pizik, did you have a question? I noticed.
Yeah, I keep turning my camera on and off, partly because I'm struggling how to formulate this question, but so I'm very interested in sort of the other side of the equation, which is die engravers, and I did a little work trying to do some data work with tracking die engravers a few years back. One of the problems is that different die study authors are more or less comfortable actually assigning identities to die engravers. And I'm just wondering if from your perspective, has there been any preliminary results in, particular die engravers actually working more or less with particular moneyers and workshops? Has the work that you've done allowed you any insights into that connection between two types of craftsmen in the ancient world that would have worked with one another a lot, but who operated on different parts of the process?
Maybe I will let Caroline answer, because she has been working a lot on this overstrike and die studies. From my point of view, there is, for example, a legend could have been done by, let's say, students, and the main tie by the guy from the mint, but it would make sense only in very large mints where you have like hundreds of dies that were made. There is still this question about what was the formation of the die engraver, because most of their time they were not working on die engraving, they were doing something else. So what they did, they took their formation from their process and how they learned to do that. If I speak about this ongoing process, I will be this Monday. We're going with the maître graveur, so the engraver in chef, working at the Monet Paris in Pessac, which is the company who's producing all coins for France, and is going to engrave for us a die in direct cutting of a Republican coin. So we are going to film this process. It's going to spend like about a week or so to doing this, and we're going also to in asking him questions about what kind of tools that he choose, how he choose to this process, where he starts the work. And I think it could give some clues about, yeah, the process followed by ancient engravers. I think it's very nice. And unfortunately, there is only very few people able to do that direct engraving for now. So that's why we also want to record that process.
Very good. There's a question from Peter Haug here. Is there any idea how exactly Seleucid serrate flans have been produced? So the serrated flans that we see in Seleucid coins, and of course in some Roman coins as well. Do you have any idea how those serrated flans were produced?
Maybe Thomas could add something, but the point, the most important point, I think, is that I think there is not just one technique, but at least two, maybe more. And the Carthaginian coins that I don't develop this example, but I think there is quite different from the Seleucid coins and from the Roman coins. But for the Seleucid ones, it looks like this serration was produced directly in the mold, but it's for the moment a very unclear question. But the shape of the serration, yes, it's quite different, and I don't think it is something produced with an instrument, a tool, a sharp tool, like for Roman coins. But what is interesting is most of the time we don't see the casting sprues. So there is the casting, and there is another phase, yes, there's something more, and maybe it's a bit more complicated to turn this casting screw into a bit more serration to have a perfect serrated coin. But it's quite difficult for the moment. Maybe Thomas knows this.
No, I didn't work much on this, and I said that we would need to see the coins themselves and to look at under electronic microscope, and we could have more clues about how they were made, if it was made before striking, after, yeah, before the flan was made, or after the flame was made, but I don't think anyone really precisely worked on this for the moment.
Very good. Do we have any other questions for our speakers? If not, I would once again like to thank all three of you very much for this excellent presentation. I know that where you are in the world, it's getting a little late in the evening. Here in New York, it still is in the middle of a beautiful afternoon. So I will bid the three of you adieu, and thank you again for a wonderful presentation. And before I forget, I will try to send you some notes on some observations on some Alexander type coins that were produced with, it seems, some sort of matrix dye. They're on some of these coins that are very far off flan. I've noted a dotted border that seems very similar to some of the coins you showed in slide 25 and 26. So these coins might have been produced in some sort of matrix type of dye or something of the sort, at least a multiple dye of some sort. So if I forget to send you that information, I've now reminded myself, and hopefully you'll remind me as well. But
okay.
Once again, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, and look forward to seeing all of you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a good day.
Thank you for watching the American Numismatic Society's YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like our online resources, publication, and events, you can support the Society by becoming a member. And don't forget to check out our book and eBay stores. The links are below.